योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिमानतोऽस्मि। लये सम्बोधयेच्चित्तं विक्षिप्तं शमयेत् पुनः सकाशायं विजानीयात् समप्राप्तं न चालयेत्। Om. In our last class, at the end of last class, actually Hari brought some extremely good points, and then I hope all of you had a little bit of time to contemplate on Hari's observations. So one of the important observations that he made is about Nidra, and that is in deep sleep. Whether in deep sleep there is any chitta vritti at all and then or not. So much debate has been done on that point. So we will try to see how we can address that concept. So far the question is, for the vritti, it relates to chitta. And we have established that the chitta is a chit, the pure awareness, pure consciousness, being covered, mixed with, contaminated by the trigunas. So based on the proportion of the gunas, it is either klishta vritti or aklishta vritti. So that we have established. So whether a vritti, the turning of the mind, the fluctuations of the mind, whether it is caused by a pramana or any that is direct perception or inference, or the trusted source is made, as soon as we hear or see or perceive with our senses, then obviously it creates a vritti. So how does it create a vritti? Why should it create a vritti? The reason is because the chitta already has got the equipment. It has the equipment of chitta, the awareness, and also it has the influence of sattva, rajas, and tamo gunas. So therefore it is a ready, fertile recipient for any of the pramanas, such as direct perception or inference or a trustworthy source giving us an information. And therefore that can, depending on our conditioning of the mind, not only the general condition of the mind but also at the moment how it was, because sometimes there can be superimpositions on our natural state by circumstances that are going on around us. So that also can cause. All of these combinations can create either klishta vritti or it can create the aklishta vritti. And so also viparyaya and vikalpa, three of which we studied in the last class. So nidra and smriti. So before we touch upon nidra, let us address one important question. The reason why I'm holding back on nidra is especially because of Hari's observation that in nidra, in deep sleep, there is no recognition of the vritti. Because of the absence of the recognition of the vritti, a little preamble to that sutra, let us examine today. So first question is, how do we recognize the vritti? Question number one. Question number two is, who is identifying with the vritti? So the reason for this question again stems from Hari's observation, because in deep sleep, the individuality or the person is not there. Because what is the personality made up of? It is made up of a deha. The body is not available in deep sleep. Indriyas, all the sense organs are not available. Manas, emotion is not available. Buddhi, intellect is not available. That is, every tool that is required for identifying a vritti is not available in deep sleep. So therefore, how can you say that nidra is a vritti? That it can generate either klishta vritti or aklishta vritti. This raises a third important question. That question is, what is the agency that actually determines the nature of the vritti? There must be an agent which is neither klishta nor aklishta, which labels a particular modification of the mind as klishta and aklishta. So thank you, Hari, for picking my brain. So these are the three inherent questions in your observation. That is, number one, how do we recognize a vritti? Number two, who is identifying these vrittis? And number three, what is that agency that determines the nature of the vritti? In short, who is that shines awareness on a vritti? Because I say that I am happy, I am unhappy, I am neutral, all these things, somebody who is not going through happiness, unhappiness or neutrality is the one who can say that. So that we will examine in the background of a beautiful conversation that takes place. You know, Janaka Maharaja and Yajnavalkya Maharshi were pretty close friends. The closeness of friendship went over for many years. So once Janaka Maharaja had organized a very huge yajna. And in that yajna, of course, because of the heritage of Yajnavalkya, as you know, is a great rishi of the Yajurveda. He was the nephew of Vaishampayana, to whom actually Vedavyasa gave the Yajurveda. And so therefore, Yajnavalkya was pretty well known. So Janaka Maharaja had invited Yajnavalkya to his court in one of these yajnas. And in that yajna, which was the Agnihotra ceremony, in that Agnihotra ceremony, Janaka Maharaja actually discovers what an extraordinary person Yajnavalkya is. And the friendship goes, and Yajnavalkya gets very sizable funding. So this brings an interesting question, that did Yajnavalkya go to the yajna for the sake of getting dakshina and making some wealth, or was there any other reason? The main reason why Yajnavalkya accepted dakshina from the host, Janaka Maharaja, was for two reasons. One is, Janaka Maharaja was the major fund source for Yajnavalkya's Gurukula. So Gurukula has to be run by the contribution of others. So the biggest contributor is the king. Just like, who is the biggest contributor to Ohio State University? Is it not the state of Ohio? But all other funds that OSU raises is small when it is compared to what they get as a grant from the state. Similarly, Yajnavalkya's Gurukula's bulk of the wealth was coming from Janaka Maharaja. So that was one of the reasons. Another reason is because of the eminence of Yajnavalkya. Janaka Maharaja asked for a boon. Now here also there is something very important for us to know. When we have a priest who comes to our home to perform any ritual, it is not just that the priest comes there, says some few mantras and does a few rituals and then walks out. He has to give us some jnana that we did not have. That is why the priest is considered as a guru. So this, of course, we formalized in all the pujas by giving a katha. So Satyanarayana puja takes place, a katha. And the priest will go on talking about the same katha over and over again, and all of us tune out. But was Yajnavalkya's Paurohitya of the same caliber? The answer is no. Whenever Yajnavalkya conducted the Paurohitya, he always gave some special jnana to the host. And Janaka, as you know, was an extraordinary Vedanta meditator and student, Paramarajarshi himself, and therefore he asked Yajnavalkya for a boon. Sir, whenever I ask you a question, please do not hesitate, and I want you to answer my questions. So this boon was granted by Yajnavalkya, and then so since Janaka Maharaja also assumed the responsibility of running the university, Janaka does not tie the two things. That's another interesting point about it. See, all this is Chittavritti related. Is Janaka's Chittavritti such that I am the one who is funding the university of Yajnavalkya, therefore I have a right to ask his question to him, and he has an obligation to respond to my question because I pay? That would have been a Klishta Vritti. But the Aklishta Vritti of Janaka Maharaja is, I am not talking about funding the university, that's a separate issue. But jnana sampadana from you is what I want, and therefore I am going to ask the question. So a very clear understanding of Janaka's mind, he makes this deal with no agenda whatsoever, but in true spirit of wanting knowledge. So this background is again important to see the Chittavritti of Janaka and the Chittavritti of Yajnavalkya. So now Yajnavalkya shows up one day in the court of in the court of Janaka. So Janaka says, Bhagavan, for what purpose have you come here? You know, that can be an offensive statement when some guest comes to your house. Why have you come here? You don't ask that. But again, see, there is no Klishta Vritti in either mind. So he asked Bhagavan, why are you here? The Vritti there is Aklishta because a Mahapurusha does not come to our home without reason. And what is that reason? The reason is to give us jnana only. But Janaka Maharaja also has a responsibility for the university. He is not sure. So he asked a question of Yajnavalkya, Sir, have you come desiring for cattle or for a discussion on subtle questions? And Yajnavalkya replies, both, Rajan. For both purposes I have come. So Yajnavalkya's coming and asking for cattle is not for himself, but for the sake of the taking care of his students. So having settled this, Janaka reminds himself that he can ask of Yajnavalkya any question. So Yajnavalkya would not refuse to answer. So Janaka's question was about vritti. His question was the three questions that I just now raised. about who is recognizing the vritti. So basically the question is who is recognizing the vritti and what is it that is actually shedding light on a particular vritti. So Yajnavalkya asks a counter question. All right, sir, whenever you are to perceive any object. So here let us talk about pratyaksha pramana, direct perception. Because in the pramana, direct perception is one of them. We have already studied. So direct perception is, how is it possible? Direct perception of an entity, how is it possible? The question asked was, what serves as light for a man? What serves as an illumination of a thing for a person? In other words, how does a vritti arise? The answer is because of the contact of our senses with Prakriti. First important part of the conversation. This again you please hold the thought, but because in Nidra, the sense organ does not have any contact with Prakriti, therefore how can we say that Nidra is a vritti? Again I'll come back, loop back to Hari's observation. Then Prakriti comes into contact with the Chitta, which through the senses comes into observation and direct perception happens, but Prakriti is illuminated by the light of the sun, the light of the sun, and it is also illuminated by our senses which receive it. So there is the illumination of the sun in the daylight on an object in nature, and our sense organs also shed light on that same object. But our sense organs actually cannot have direct perception without the light of the sun. There is a precondition for our eyes to see an object, that there must be sunlight. And then, therefore, the question is, this contact takes place. As soon as this contact takes place, a chitta vritti arises in the mind about that entity. I like it, I don't like it, I don't care for it. After all, only three possibilities are there. And all these three possibilities, how do they arise? They arise because of the previous vasana and samskara, but every contact with Prakriti results in karma only. And what is that karma? Even our thought about it is also karma. Everything is karma which leaves a trace on the chitta. General principle. So therefore it can be klishta or aklishta. So therefore Janaka answers the question by saying the sun is the one who illumines the object so that my sense organs can perceive and motivate me to do karma. It can be physical or it can be just mental. So the question obviously says that, well, sun is there only for half the day. What about when the sun is set and that illumination is not there? Then there is the moon. What if the moon is not there? Then there is a star. What if the stars are not there? Then it is the lamp, light, fire that is before you. Then he says, when the sun, when the moon, when the fire have just been put out, what illumines? So why this is important? In Nidra, there is no sun, there is no moon, there is no fire. Isn't it? If all of them are put out, what illumines? Janaka Maharaj has a speech. Let us say you and I are going in pitch dark place, or this is a common experience. You come home late in the night and The whole house is dark, absolutely dark. Then you enter the house. After you enter the house, what conversation takes place between when you have entered the house before you switch on the light? How do you recognize that the person who walked in with you is your spouse? It could be anybody else, right? So that is known by means of speech. So Janaka Maharaj says, Vak Ucharati. Speech is the one that illumines. Then Yajnavalkya asked the question, if speech is also stopped, who sheds the light in quiet? Then he says, the self. Janaka did not know. Then Yajnavalkya replies, the self or the Purusha is the one who actually shines. Now comes the next question, which is this self? Now it is the turn of Janaka to ask of Yajnavalkya, which is this self? Yajnavalkya replies, it is the Purusha. It is the Vijnanamaya, which is in the midst of Indriyas. Let me parse that phrase. Vijnanamaya, that is completely replete with knowledge, is located in the sense organs. And that is called Buddhi. Buddhi or the intellect is the one where the Purusha resides as light. Again, we should not confuse that Purusha is in Buddhi. Because if we say Purusha is in Buddhi, we get into another conflict saying, of course, Yoga Shastra accepts infinite Purushas. Therefore, as we are studying Yoga Shastra, we can probably infer that there is an individual Purusha in each one of the Buddhi. But this Purusha, even let us say it is Brahman, in Vedanta, because that was also another point which we contrast in Nidra, this resides as a Jyoti or as a light within the Buddhi and the heart of the Buddhi. Now, how to understand this? That the light exists, and that you just imagine, where does the light exist in a lamp? You have a lamp. It has got oil. It has got wick. Is the light in the lamp? Is the light in the oil? Is the light in the wick? And where does this light shine most? Only in the wick that has been dipped in the oil when lighted up, isn't it? And therefore you see, Purusha is the one who lights up this wick called Buddhi. And in this Buddhi, actually Purusha assumes the likeness of the intellect. So what is the likeness of the intellect? The likeness of the intellect is to understand. But Buddhi, intellect we have already established that it is inert. So how can an inert object such as a wick that is dipped in oil, how can it light up? It requires an external agency to light it up. And that external agency is a Purusha who lights up by becoming the likeness of Buddhi. It appears as though we are thinking all these things with our Buddhi. It appears that Buddhi is the sentient part of our sense organs. Actually, it is the Purusha who is the sentient organ, and therefore this Purusha wanders. Where does this Purusha wander? It wanders in our wakeful state, Jagrat Avastha, in our dream state, Swapna Avastha, and in our deep sleep state, Sushupti Avastha. Now you can see how deep and profound is this role of Purusha. Without our knowing, unknown to us, all our thoughts, all our perceptions, all our ideas, whatever is going through in us is illumined by this Purusha who is, if we are awake, he is in the wakeful state. If we are in dream, he is in the dream state. If we are in deep sleep state, he is in the deep sleep state. And this Purusha is the totality of consciousness. Yajnavalkya concludes. This totality of consciousness, he calls it as Ishvaraha. Ishvaraha tishtati. Tishtati means dwells. He dwells, and therefore even in Nidra, it is the Purusha who is awake in a insensible body, mind, antakarana, etc. Deha is asleep. Indriyas are asleep. Buddhi is asleep. But Purusha is awake. They're never sleeping. So the Purusha, even though the Purusha is ever awake and never sleeps, here is where we will come back to Yoga Shastra. This Purusha who is ever awake and never asleep, he is the witnessing and not becoming the vritti. Because if he becomes the vritti, then Purusha also is subject to Klishta, Aklishta vritti. And Purusha will be a person who is awake, and that person who is awake becomes a different person in dream. Another story is there. In that story, actually, Ajatashatru points out by saying when he comes across a deep sleeping person and he calls him as the emperor of the three worlds, there was no response at all. That means when the individual is in deep sleep and Deha, Indriya is not available, whatever you call that person, the person will not have any vritti. But now we have the Purusha who is ever awake and never sleep will be witnessing without becoming a vritti as a drashta, the seer. And therefore you see the mission of Yoga Shastra is tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam, to establish yourself in the quality and the characteristic of Purusha. How important it is, because if by Ishvara's grace, Ishvara pranidhanat, by means of his grace, if my buddhi, whose heart is Purusha, isn't it, is capable of experiencing every chitta vritti with the same illumination as the Purusha is, the person is established. So in Nidra, what has happened? Purusha actually has, in fact, been very, very aware of the vrittis of the mind which is not there. The absence of the vrittis, and therefore Patanjali Maharshi says, how can we say that Nidra is also a vritti because the witnessing Purusha has discovered abhava pratyayalambana vritti Nidra. So pratyaya, what is the meaning of pratyaya? We can translate pratyaya as the contents of the mind. Contents of the mind is caused by a karana, a cause. What is the cause? Direct perception, inference, or trusted source. So the cause itself is absent. How, when Ajatashatru calls his lowest rung gatekeeper, you are the emperor of the three worlds, no vritti was caused in that mind, isn't it? Even though that statement was made. Who made the statement? The emperor Ajatashatru made the statement. Whom can you trust more than the emperor himself? And therefore even that did not cause any vritti in the deep sleep person. So karana was not there, cause was not there. When the karana is not there, vritti also will not be there. So what was it that Purusha perceived in Nidra? Purusha found that the contents of the vritti was absent in the antakarana. So hence, when causes are absent, it appears as though there is no vritti. But was there no vritti at all, is the question. Because how did we define chitta vritti? Vritti we defined as a combination of chitta and gunas, isn't it? So if chitta and gunas have come together to form chitta and there is any vritti, the recognizing force is Purusha, and this Purusha is ever awake while the person was in deep sleep. Purusha was awake. What did this Purusha find when I was in deep sleep? It discovered there was no karana. But I woke up. See, this is the reason why Vedanta does not accept Nidra as a vritti. Because with the absence of karana and there is absolutely no thought at all, then it refuses, because Vedanta, especially Advaita Vedanta, does not accept multiple Purushas. But here Yoga Shastra accepts multiple Purushas. As many Purushas as there are sentient beings. So for the sake of Yoga Shastra, the Ashvat Purusha that is there, who was the awake, when Ashvat was in deep sleep, it discovered a vritti. And how does it prove? When I woke up, when I say I slept very comfortably, my mind is in a perfect prasanna, present state. So if I wake up and then I say that my mind is in a very pleasant state, then my chitta vritti in my deep sleep was sattva guna pradhana. In my sleep, the dominant combination of my chitta with the guna was in sattva guna. Therefore, when I wake up in the morning, I say my mind is very refreshed and it is prasanna. All right. I get up and then I say I am restless. My mind is agitated even though I had deep sleep. Then the vritti in that sleep was rajoguna pradhana. Then we have a heavy lunch, and then after heavy lunch you feel very, very sleepy. And then we say that, okay, I'll just sit on the couch and take a short nap. And then it turns out that you have slept for 2 hours. And then when you get up, you say, oh my God, I feel so sluggish. I cannot move. I cannot think. And I'll just simply sit on the couch. And then the rest of the evening is ruined because of oversleeping in the afternoon. Then it is tamoguna pradhana. So Yoga Shastra, Hari, to answer your question, says that this Purusha has recognized in your deep sleep whether the Sattva-guna Pradhana was there, Rajoguna Pradhana was there, and Tamoguna Pradhana was there. It identifies these vrittis. Only thing is, for the Buddhi, the revelation comes after the fact. And hence, Yoga Shastra concludes, that is why the multiple Purushas is a key point. Yoga Shastra concludes that Abhava Pratyalambana Nidra. Of course, Yoga Nidra and so many other things are there. But basically here, this is the interpretation of the Abhava Pratyalambana Nidra. Then the next sutra is Smriti, right? Correct. Anubhuta Vishaya Asampramoshaha Smritihi is the next sutra. Next and final in this series of the how Chittavrittis arise. So the literal meaning of the word Sampramosha means to steal, to commit theft. Sampramosha means not committing theft. That means you have not lost it. You have not lost. Nobody has stolen away your possession. What is that? Vishaya. Vishaya means all those various experiences, that is anubhavas, that we had by contact with Prakriti. It can be both pleasant or unpleasant. And those unpleasant or pleasant chitta vrittis which have been experienced, anubhuta. Anubhuta means which have been experienced. Asampramoshaha, which is not lost. The mind has not been deprived of the past experiences, and those past experiences which have never been lost is smriti or memory. Now, what is the problem with the chitta vritti of memory? Because of the chitta vritti of any memory, anything can trigger. In fact, I'm sure it is in all of our experiences. What we remember may have no relationship with what is happening around us now. Absolutely no relationship. Suddenly some memory pops up in the mind. And immediately as soon as that memory pops up in the mind, then the chitta vritti happens, and then we get into the issue of klishta and aklishta. And therefore, we can also interpret asampramoshaha as remembering, asampramoshaha as not that one we have lost. We can also say not letting go. Most importantly, we retain without loss certain memories which have caused us intense klishta or intense aklishta, and we do not want to let it go. So this not letting go of what? Of Vishaya. Vishaya here consists of an object. It can be an object of experience. It can be a field of action which was intense. Say, for example, you vividly remember a narrow escape by a hair's breadth in an accident. So every time a vehicle comes closer to you, that memory will pop up. How you escaped by a hair's breadth, what could have been a very nasty, terrible accident. So if that whole picture of that setting, what car, where, which color, where it was, what time it was, that entire field of action will come. And we will also remember how every senses, our all senses became so awake and sharp. That sensory experience. So in this sutra, Vishaya is, it could be an object that is not letting go of from our memory. It can be a field of action, or it can be an object in a objective sensory experience, or an object of sensory experience. All these three are in the memory. So Smriti has got some factors which actually support it. Otherwise, Smriti will disappear without often if it has no support. And that support is the other four: Pramana, Viparyaya, Vikalpa, and Nidra. All those four also contribute to the Chittavritti of Smriti. See how deep it becomes if we do not really process all these experiences, whether it is pramana or viparya, vikalpa or nidra. It can affect our memory. And memory, though it is indispensable for us, for our progress. Later on we will see in Sutra number 20 how important is memory. In spite of that, it can also be an obstacle. So when it supports progress, it is aklishta vritti. When it hinders us, it is aklishta vritti. What are the obstacles that can come? Old prejudices may come back. That's an obstacle. Cultural conditions can come back. And it can also be our own kama krodha. And therefore we can never see events unfolding in new lights. So while tradition, heritage, and then aspects of culture are important, all these aspects are important in the context of Desha Kala. At that point of time, in that place, what happened and what according to the culture was appropriate. But what we do, we transfer that smriti into a different desha, kala, karana, and therefore we will suffer. Look at the practicality of this. We have to, by yoga, we have to be able to incorporate the values of the past smriti in the context of the present desha kala nimitta. When we are able to incorporate in the present time, present place, in the present context, then we can stand outside the smriti of memory and examine as to what action we have got to take. See, this is where progress can happen. What do we mean by progress? Wherever we break the barriers of the past, which limit growth, when we break those barriers, we will have the progress. And Smriti has got two possible challenges. One is a past achievement. Whatever has happened in the past achievement, it may create an ahankara today, once again. This you have seen people who have retired, all of them gather together and they go sit in a park on a bench, and each one of them will be telling to each other what glorious things they did when they were in service. I have myself heard of this in Bangalore, in Lal Bagh, which is a very beautiful botanical garden, which is a hot attraction for retired people. And they will sit there and they will be talking about, I did this, I did that, I talked to my boss like this, I managed this project in this way. And nobody listens to another person. They are only talking about themselves. So it can create an ahankara. Smriti also can create regret. What is the thing I did not do properly? What is it that I should have done? So these two defects also can be there in Smriti. So Patanjali Maharshi incorporates Smriti also in the list of the vrittis, which can either cause Klishta vritti or Aklishta vritti. So asampramosha is a key word here. A yogi will actually have to work on whatever he has not let go, those things which are constantly in his smriti. In dhyana, we must be able to identify what is it I actually give up and what is it I retain. Ruthlessly, we have got to remove the klishta vritti generated by smriti. And that is very, very important part of course, it comes from Abhyasa and Vairagya, which we will see when we take up the next sutra. So that is why the understanding of these first 11 sutras is of critical importance. So the first 4 sutras, Atha Yoga Anushasanam, Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha, Tada Drashtu Swarupe Avasthanam, Vritti Saropyam Itaratra. These 4 establish the fundamental principles of Yoga Sutra. And then the next definition of the vritti is pramana, which is correct perception, viparyaya, which is the incorrect perception, vikalpa, imagination, nidra, sleep, and memory, smriti. And then what are the pramanas? Pratyaksha, anumana, agamaha, pramanani, sutra number 7. Sutra number 8, viparyayaha, misconception or error, is mithya jnanam, tat rupam. Tat means that, means not that, rupam means form. That which is not is perceived as that which is, and therefore it is a misconception. And all vrittis based on misconception, pratishtham, is going to cause klishta vritti. Then shabdajnananupati vastushunyo vikalpaha. Vikalpa is conceptualization based on word and meaning, but not supported by reality. And nidra, we saw, is abhava pratyaya alambana vritti. Then smriti is anubhota vishaya asampramosha. So basically, to summarize, there is the chit. This chit is none other than the purusha. And this purusha is illumining all our mental perceptions in wakeful state, dream state and deep sleep state. And he is in the heart of the buddhi, constantly illuminating everything. But because the chitta mixed with the trigunas, customized for the person at the time of experience, causes either klishta vritti or aklishta vritti. Because of whether it is sattva, rajasa or tamo gunas. And therefore, the purpose of yoga is to separate the buddhi along with the heart which is being illumined by this Purusha, and to look at the chitta vritti, identify its quality, slowly make it as much sattvaguna pradhana as possible. And this is possible only when there is practice. So before we enter into the concept of abhyasa vairagya abhyanta nirodha, is there any gap in identifying the vrittis up to sutra number 11 and starting on sutra number 12, abhyasa vairagya abhyam tannirodha? What is it that Patanjali Maharshi taught in between? So this is something I have mentioned earlier also. When the sages are constructing a sutra, between sutras, lot of teaching would have taken place. And that teaching, at the end of that teaching, this sage who is teaching the philosophy or the subject will conclude with a sutra. So far what he has done, lot of discussion have gone on the chitta vritti, klishta vritti, aklishta vritti, how does vritti arise, who is it that is illumining the chitta vritti, all those things. We filled the gap that is not there directly in the sutra itself. It is not only that, we also have to contemplate from one section of the sutra to another section of the sutra. When he is now introducing abhyasa vairagya abhyam tannirodha, chittavritti nirodha can happen by means of abhyasa and vairagya. Did he say anything in between? So let us speculate on that. Suppose I am asked to take up a practice. I am told to take up a practice. So many instructions we get. We get from our parents, we get from our boss at work, we get from our spouses, we get from society, we have got that from childhood, teachers. How many of them have we really wholeheartedly taken up and done it? How much resistance has taken place? Is it not that we will do what we want to do, basically, ultimately? Little accommodation here and there for the sake of keeping peace could be there. But the mind is not completely there. The heart is not there completely. So therefore, Patanjali Maharshi would have probably spoken on Sankalpa. Unless and until we do a Sankalpa ourselves, I am interested in my mind. How is it this Sankalpa is very important? If I am not interested in my mind, who is interested in my mind? I am the one who is most interested in my own mind. So first Sankalpa is, I am actually interested in my mind. I am concerned about my mind and its klishta vritti, aklishta vritti. I do come across constantly in contact with Prakriti. And every time I come into contact with Prakriti, it creates a vritti. And that vritti can be klishta or aklishta. How do I handle the klishta vritti? How do I leverage Aklishta Vritti? So many questions. For all these questions, our tradition has given one solution by saying, Sankalpa, do the correct Sankalpa. It seems there was a small sapling on the side of a road. And whoever was walking, I'm sure when we have walked many times across the Sayato River, in Greg's Reservoir, we would have seen and stepped on many of those small sprouting plants. So this a story personifies by saying there was this plant on which everybody who was walking on that road was trampling, and they would just not even pay attention to where they put their foot. One sensitive person also steps on it and then goes one step further, turns back and asks this plant, "Oh my God, I stepped on you. And I also noticed so many people have walked over you. How do you feel?" Then this sapling said, "I am not feeling anything. Only I have got one sankalpa. And that sankalpa is, no matter how many people walk over me, I am going to become a tree one day. And in that tree, I will give shade to whoever sits underneath. In that tree, I will host thousands of birds. In that tree, I will sprout flowers and fruits." That sankalpa. No matter what challenges come in our life, no matter how many times we are beaten by how many experiences and how many people, having this firm sankalpa that I will control my chitta vrittis and I will establish in Drashtaswarupe avasthanam. That is my goal. 10 years later, the same man came and he found this tree. Grow, host, serve, give shade. That is what Patanjali Maharshi must have taught when he said, Abhyasa presupposes the determination to grow in spite of all challenges. And for that, O man, you have been given all the necessary tools. So we have the beautiful Shanti mantra, Vang me manasi pratisthita. What is it that gives chitta vritti? It is speech. We saw that. Even in pitch darkness, speech illumines. Now speech is illuminating outside, but let this speech illumine my manas and establish in it. So we have the Veda mantra, walk. May means my walk, manasi pratisthita. Let it go and establish itself in the mind and illumine the mind. Mano me vachi pratishtitam. And another sankalpa is there. In that sankalpa, look at all the tools that I have got. And we say, Hey Ishvara, apyayantu mama angani. May all my limbs be made available to convert Klishta Vritti into Aklishta Vritti. Vak, Prana, Chakshu, Shrotram, Indriyani, Apyayantu Mamangani, Vak, Pranas, Chakshu, Shrotram, Manu, Indriyani. And Ishvara, please bless me. Hey Purusha, bless me. Hey Chit, bless me. So therefore he talks about Sankalpa before we even attempt to study the next sutra, Abhyas Vairagya Abhyam Tannirodha. So Sankalpa Shakti will result in Sankalpa Siddhi. So that Sankalpa Shakti, Sankalpa Siddhi, how to achieve it is something for us to contemplate before we jump into the concept of Abhyasa and Vairagya. That gap has to be filled. Otherwise, the more we start identifying the Klishta Vrittis, because of the conditioning of our Smriti or memory, only Aklishta Vrittis surface. The more and more we try to remember things, the more and more unpleasant things only come up. See, that is why when the Milky Ocean was churned, the first thing that came was Hala Hala Visha. That's why when this Manasa Sarovara is we try to churn this Manasa Sarovara, only Visha will come. And that Hala Hala, we should be able to hold it in Vishuddhi Chakra. Not let it go to the heart, nor let it go to the mind, brain, intellect. If it goes to the intellect, our thinking is compromised. If it goes to the heart, our emotions are destroyed. We become stones. So Paramashiva holds it in his throat. And therefore, Sankalpa Shakti is the prerequisite even to take up Abhyasa. We'll see that in our next class. Thank you.